Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jen Jordan, and I lead content and thought leadership at Insight Partners. I also organize the Scaleup AI conference coming up on November 12th, which features keynotes from Allie K. Miller and Andrew Ng. As a preview to this amazing event in less than 2 weeks, I'm so excited to introduce this fireside discussion today with Templafy co-founder Lund and Insight Partners Vice President Sophie Beshar. During our session today, Templafy is pleased to offer 35% off a virtual ticket for Scaleup AI. The code and website will appear right here below this during the chat. With that, please welcome our speakers to the stage. Over to you, Sophie.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining. Welcome to Scaleup AI Soundbites, a series of AI-centric LinkedIn Live sessions featuring the leaders of Insight Partners portfolio companies who are shaping the future of AI. As Jen mentioned, these talks set the stage for Scaleup AI, which is one of the first global conferences that brings together top builders, executives, and innovators across AI, coming up on November 12th. So Insight Partners is thrilled that our portfolio company, Templafy, is a Scaleup AI partner this year, and I'm excited to interview their co-founder, Christian, today. So Christian, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Maybe we can just start with the basics. Can you tell me a little bit about why Templafy exists and what types of customers Templafy works with?
Yeah, well, the short version is that we exist to eliminate all the manual work that goes into producing business documents. And the little bit longer version, also connected to the types of companies we work with, is related to knowledge work in general. Knowledge work passes through these phases where you have to do knowledge discovery, and then you distill it. At some point, you need to document it. Only then can you deliver the value. And that happens like a lot across the world, like trillions of documents across the world. But the ones we focus on are the ones that actually rely on business documents to deliver their value to their customers. And for that reason, they have a high need for accuracy outside of just speed. They also need to be very accurate on some of these pretty complex documents to be able to deliver their value. So what we do is to be very close to that process, to do a lot of automation as we've done for a long, long time, and now also obviously including a lot of AI in the mix to make sure that we can deliver those high value outputs in forms of business documents for our customers.
Makes sense. And it sounds like if it's automating different parts of business documents, there's probably a lot of different opportunities for where you could use AI and incorporate AI into that. Maybe switching gears to the focus of today, how are you currently using AI in the product?
Yeah, so we've been using AI for a long time for certain things, more on the back end of the product, for things like tagging of assets or also data transformation that we've been doing up for a long time. But maybe more important, and what our customers are really excited about, it's also now to actually output content that goes into those business documents and that is something that we do a lot. So the process that we have around this is to blend some of the capabilities that have existed for a long time, where it's rules-based automation. You go through flows, we capture information and context for the user, and based on that, connect to different data sources to populate information in documents. But now we've extended that to also be able to inform AI models to allow our customers to control the questions that goes into these processes. So you can have different areas of a document being informed by AI and blend that with different AI models. And as I said, also with more classic rules-based automation. And that's our way to sort of get to these highly reliable outputs that otherwise can be super difficult. So we're using that a lot, both on the front end and on the back end of the product.
Got it. And you already were mentioning a couple different kind of ROIs, the higher accuracy, cutting down on some manual labor. What do you think about as the number one ROI that you're focused on providing for your customers with this new AI focus, although you've been obviously doing AI for a while?
Yeah, so well, specifically around AI, the three things we do, and they all really come out pretty clearly, is to de-risk is a big thing, because the types of companies we work with are sometimes in the hundreds of thousands of people. So there's a lot of people involved and a lot of risk of human error and inability to have like full control about certain things that absolutely need to be accurate. So risk is a big thing, right? The other part is obviously productivity and time saving, whereas obviously the big promise of AI, and one thing that we've seen very early, especially in its ability to do very quick knowledge discovery and distillation of that, So that's a big thing for us. People want to work faster. I don't think I've ever met a customer that didn't want to be more efficient. And then more recently, the questions that we're having is how that translates into revenue. So how you can use this to your advantage to be not only quicker but also better, and capture some of that information so you can inform your next document better and things like that. So we're trying to deliver value across all those three areas. We've done that always, but that is the focus that we definitely have with AI as well. Productivity is almost a given, but making sure you can do that without the risk and also make sure it translates into revenue is something we've been focusing on.
Makes sense, especially given the enterprise focus of Templafy and making sure everything is very compliant and, in line with the brand that the enterprise wants to launch. So that all makes sense. I'm curious how you think about the product positioning today with the role AI is playing, and also how that might change in the future.
Yeah, it's if you go back 18 months or so, a little bit longer, when we saw this general availability of the general AI models for Gen AI, ChatGPT, and so on, we were taking a step back and we really started to consider how is it we want to run this. What's going to be what the future is actually going to be looking like for this. And we thought, well, the models are great, but they're also going to have a hard time on their own if you don't start controlling better what you ask them. And
Right.
Especially for us, we knew that was going to be extremely important, because it came out as like there was one model that needs to have the answer to everything, and then the user is the primary sort of influencer of what goes into the models. And we saw immediately that's going to be very difficult to actually follow through on, and thought that probably there were going to be a lot of very specialized models. And very early on, some of our customers were telling us that they had like literally hundreds of projects going on with specialized models for very specific purposes. And a problem that they had was, as they started to get those models trained really well, they had the other issue in terms of making sure they could use them properly and get the output out of them that was required. So they also needed some interfaces and UIs and integrations that would be able to speak to those models and pull out information from them. And not always in the form of documents, of course, but that was a big issue for them. How is it we can use all these new super brains that we have, these new employees almost, for us to use that more, actually put some, enable our companies to even use AI for their real use cases. So that was definitely a big step that we took. So we've taken the position about being less about the models and more about the enablement of the models by controlling both the questions you ask the models, which models you ask. So there's big infrastructure that enables our customers to point different prompts, or we call them briefs actually, because we like to elaborate them a lot beyond what a user would typically do as a prompt, and then be able to direct them to the most eloquent or the best model that can give the best output. And then finally to build them into the workflows that are important for our customers. So populate information in specific parts of the document. And it's really just replicating reality as it was before AI. Because if you were to go through a process where you wanted to have information sitting in a document, you didn't have anything to help you, what would you do? You would go ask, the subject matter expert and not the random person, and you would give that subject matter expert as rich context as possible for them to answer it. And that's the way you would get to reliable outputs. And that's the position we've taken as well, to be sure that you can be very strong on the context you give to AI, and be specific on the AI you ask, and be specific on exactly where you needed its input from it. So that's been our position, and it's seemingly resonating, which is good.
That's always exciting to hear. And it sounds like you're really trying to meet the customers where they're at in terms of like what they want to be using for the AI models and what type of workflow they want to be creating, which is smart, rather than just, deciding, okay, this is going to be our AI strategy, and not having to be in an ongoing conversation. I guess stepping a little bit outside of just Templafy, as you think about the broader market of docgen, what role do you think AI will play in shaping that market?
Short word, enormous impact. That will be have a very, very significant role. Almost goes without saying, because document generation is a lot about content production, which is one of the big promises as well of AI. But there are still some things that, again, needs to be figured out, because we think where AI has been like super strong in the early promise is really about this piece on the discovery of knowledge, the distillation of knowledge, extremely quick. Some of those big use cases that we see, for example, out of Microsoft, very good at summarizing Teams calls and using that because the context is so great. It's really, there's a lot of things to work with. It's also really good when you repurpose stuff, when you have, again, good context in form of a document that you want to use for another purpose, for example. Where it has had a bigger problem right now, or up until now, and something that will need to be fixed, but will be fixed, is more about when you generate new content and you have very little context. That's where it's very difficult, because AI just lives on context to understand what you're trying to do. And that is where we think that document generation platforms, including our own, will need to play a pretty significant role, because it sits very tightly at the spot where you're with the user and can actually get that context and information out that you can use to build these prompts and inform AI in the right way. So we're, of course, taking our stand there and trying to be very supportive of actually doing exactly that. We think others will hopefully join us on that journey to do the same. And as that progresses over time, we think that Gen AI will be used a lot more, and you'll see some replacement of the classic automation tools that used to use for these pieces. That leans more into AI in the future, and hopefully, in maybe a little bit further down the road, there'll be a lot of those things just being carried out by AI.
That's great to hear. When you are already speaking about some of the challenges that can come up from using AI, and maybe some of the moments when the expectations and the reality don't quite overlap, I'm curious, on the flip side, do you have any stories of like the best use cases of your customers using AI and really getting a lot of value out of it?
Yeah, first of all, I would actually comment on some of the disappointment that has driven this, because we have seen that a lot. You know, there was pretty much of a race also producing very high-res videos that would explain things that looked like magic, and which is understandable. But so we've mostly been hearing in the first wave actually a lot of disappointment in terms of what was actually possible to use. And that was driven by what you said before, because it was very much like a technology project for in many areas, where let's hire a person who's now the person responsible for AI, which makes sense to get your head around it. But what we're seeing now, and also getting closer to some of the very strong use cases and positive use cases, they get closer to what you're actually trying to do with it, to put use to it. Like, same thing with any other technology was a claim when sort of the cloud wave came along. It took a while to translate that into something that was actually useful. But that is happening now, and so some of the very good use cases that we see now, and the positive stories, is that you've literally been able to replace work that used to be something that would sit with a user, that classic automation wouldn't be able to do it, because it's more elaborate, where it really feels like brain replacement in certain types of documents that has not only accelerated the speed dramatically in terms of how quickly you can output documents, but also made them better. And we hear that every day. So that's very positive, but it took a while to get.
So it sounds like a lot of the value you see is by moving beyond more of like the simple quote unquote tasks to automate and streamline, and getting into more complicated types of content or documents. And that's where you see AI having the biggest impact in the workflow.
Exactly. That's where we think the biggest opportunity is. Like, the closer you can get to complex, the better, because that is where the majority of work, especially knowledge work, sits. And that is where the majority of the value is created. Like, we'll quickly get beyond like the simpler things, like doing some of the stuff you mentioned before, but we need to get closer to the more complex pieces. But what that requires is a little bit more of orchestration to make sure that you're very deliberate on, like you would be on an office floor, like, who do I ask to do which things, and replicate that a little bit. And there are definitely opportunity, but it does require technologies that have that ability to do that orchestration on the back end. And at least that's what we're optimizing for. And not only because we think it's the way forward, but also because that's what customers are asking.
Right. And ultimately, it's such a harder problem to solve than replicating, like a digital workflow that's easy to automate with a couple different clicks, versus sounds like so much of the value you see as Templafy is bringing that like human level context and understanding of a company and what they're trying to say and do onto a platform. And that's always going to be innately more hard.
Exactly. It's the more elaborate parts that can be difficult to do with classic automation. Like, for example, I need the latest update on what goes on in this industry through the lens of this type of person. Having that through a classic automation process is impossible. So that would be one of the tasks that would sit with an expert, which makes sense. But we want to make sure that we can accelerate that process. So to make sure that you can inform it well, and make sure that you ask the right AI to come back with that type of information and use it exactly where that information is actually supposed to be used. So there is a lot of, without it sounding wrong, like opportunity for brain replacement. You want to make sure that we use AI as a super smart person, but you also want to make sure that the second you have another AI that is actually better at giving you the answers for that thing, that you can easily flip over and ask that AI instead. And that's back to the infrastructural part. So you're not locked up with like one model that needs to have the answer to everything forever.
Oh, got it. So a part of the value offering is also being able to kind of route to the best model at the best time for accuracy.
That's a huge thing. We see that already. And that's what I mean by seeing the race on the models, where there's been a lot of investments also from you guys going into sort of the clean AI companies that are building the models. That makes a ton of sense. But there's also kind of, that's sort of new people, so to speak, that would also be competing with each other and be very specialized in different areas. And there will be a need to be able to switch between not only which one can give you the best answer, but within a specific area that you want to be able to switch to the one that is always the best, which might be a different one tomorrow. So that requires, again, an infrastructure that can point you in that direction, which gives you less reliance on like one model or one partner. Yeah, that's what we're optimizing for, at least. Yeah.
Makes sense. And I think it's interesting to hear you talk about the challenges with actually implementing some of these AI projects for your customers. And we definitely hear that a lot across the different companies that we interact with. It's one of the things we'll be talking about at the Scaleup AI conference is, okay, there's all these expectations and hype and excitement, and how do you actually turn that into reality in terms of actual output and improvement for AI? So exciting to hear that you're already thinking about that. I just have one last question for you, which is switching gears away from a little bit the product and the market, but obviously on the financial side, at the end of the day, as you launch every new product or think about a new feature rollout, you're obviously tracking also like the lift it would provide on the financial performance. So I'm curious, how do you see the role of AI's product for Templafy in improving or changing any financials?
Well, again, like very big. We've already seen that. And what drives that is essentially two things. First of all, we can play a role in something that can just unlock more value if you orchestrate well, like down the roads of what we've been discussing today. So to play a part of that is just a way to accelerate the amount of value we were able to deliver to our customers, like if you go 2 years back. So the more value we're able to generate and create and process to our customers, obviously the more value our offering is. So that's a big part. The other thing is that it's getting a lot more to the attention of people. Actually, what AI has done has driven also the understanding that this is something that can even be done. Having a full automation around these processes. It's really educated that, because now there's an expectation that this can be done, and now you just need to orchestrate. And that also means that there are new budgets coming into this area, because it is a very interesting area for lots of companies to invest in, because so much time and effort and risk and money lost on the table actually goes into, as boring as they sound, business documents, but they really take up a lot of headspace for people. And we've been sort of taking that away for the past 10 years, but now we can accelerate that process. And of course, that influences as well our own financial performance in the years to come.
Well, very exciting to hear. Thank you so much for the time today, Christian, and for chatting with us. I'm looking forward to spending more time together at the conference in just 2 weeks.